Hi, I'm Jill, the Omukade, the VTuber, and this is Elden Ring video, as you could probably tell by the title of the video. Now, Elden Ring uh, consumed my life a little bit, as it did with a lot of people, and on the other hand, I'm not an essay YouTuber, which is very important to mention because this video is gonna lack the quality you might expect from essay YouTube videos, at least in terms of editing. But I felt a little bit inspired to talk about lore and story and theories about Elden Ring. I love that kind of stuff, and so I wanted to discuss them in this video. And as you can tell by the title, we're going to be talking about none other than Marika herself and her tits, of course. Now, talking about Marika is hard, to say the least, because we do not really know a lot about her, but I will try my best. Now, this video will include lore bits, which are canonical, but will also include a lot of theorizing, as any video about Elden Ring's lore would, really, at the end of the day. I will theorize, and I will theorize sometimes with evidences from the game, but sometimes I will theorize not with evidences, but simply with my feelings, my thoughts as a writer, my thoughts as an enjoyer of Elden Ring, my thoughts as an enjoyer of From Software games in general, and so on and so forth. At the end of the day, if my video will have some interesting ideas, that will be good. If my videos will give inspiration to someone else to theorize their own ideas, that would also be cool. And if I get anything right, I will never let anyone forget that. I will wear that as a badge of honor until the rest of my life. But with that being said, why don't we get into the video? Now, to discuss Marika, we need to discuss a lot of things beforehand. I think that I would like to discuss Marika in 3 bits. Let us call them beginning, middle, and the end. Now, of course, from our perspective, Marika's whole life happened in the past, because the game begins after her death. But for the purpose of the video, we will separate her life into those 3 segments. The beginning will essentially be everything that is before her golden order, the middle will be her golden order, and then the end will be essentially events leading up to the shattering of the ring, and then eventually, of course, the beginning of the game. And so right now, we need to talk about the beginning. Who is Marika and where did she come from? And we do not really know that well now, do we? But we can speculate. Before we speculate, however, we need to talk about something. So, Marika is an Empyrean. What is Empyrean? We do not know. But I can theorize about that a little bit. So, I believe there is something of a hierarchy of existence. At the bottom you have mortals, right? That's us, the normal people. And then above them are demigods. And then I believe above demigods are the Empyreans, who can be called essentially lesser gods. And the biggest advantage of being an Empyrean is that you can communicate with the outer gods, or greater gods, if you will, such as the Greater Will or the Fell God. We can assume probably, we'll get back to that in a moment. And so I believe this is the hierarchy that we have. Now, we do know, actually we do not. You see, I was about to say, we do know that you're not born as an Empyrean, but we don't really now know that, do we? But we can speculate. You see, we have, give or take, 5 Empyreans in the story confirmed. We have Marika herself, obviously. We have Rani the Witch, who becomes an Empyrean. That is important. We have Miquella and Milena, who could become Empyreans and were on their have to become Empyreans, which is also important to consider. And we have the Dusk-Eyed Queen, who I might refer from now on as... Actually, it's not Dusk, my bad. It's Gloam-Eyed Queen, who I might refer to as GEQ from now on, because that's just easier to pronounce than Gloam-Eyed Queen from... Can I just call her Gloam? Can I just call her Gloam, or the Queen? It's much easier than saying the whole thing, really. But yeah, of course, those are the 5 Empyreans that we currently have confirmed in the story. Now, of course, if you missed the memo and are wondering where it's been said that Gloam-Eyed Queen, or Gloam, Gloomy, maybe would be a good nickname, was named to be Empyrean, well, it was said in the Black Flame ritual incantations, which says, the Gloam-Eyed Queen led the Apostles. It is said that she was an Empyrean chosen by the Fingers. So, says it right there, really. And we need to start considering a lot of things from that. So, we do not know the relationship between Marika and Gloam, right? Some people believe that she might be Marika's daughter, because people believe that a certain character might be Marika's daughter, but we'll get to that in a moment. For now, there's nothing concrete suggesting that Gloam-Eyed Queen is Marika's daughter, so let us assume that maybe they are sisters or just 2 separate individuals of the same sort. That is a little bit irrelevant to the conversation of how you become an Empyrean. Gloam-Eyed Queen backstory, I will talk about that because she does play a role in Marika's story, but I will talk about her a little bit later. For now, let us focus on Empyreans and how you become an Empyrean. And this is the very important word that I use, become an Empyrean. Because the story seems to suggest that you become an Empyrean, you are not born as an Empyrean. Neither of the characters in the story, Melina, Miquella, or Ronnie, were born to be an Empyrean. Melina needs to bloom 3 times to become an Empyrean. Miquella needs to grow in his Halec tree to become an Empyrean, and Ronnie, as she puts it, needs to walk the dark path of the Empyrean. The story seems to suggest that Empyrean is something that you are not born as much as you become. Almost like you ascend. So what could be the prerequisites for being an Empyrean? Well, I think I might have the answer. So first is obviously being demigod. All the Empyreans that we have in the story are demigods, with the exception of course, the Gloam-Eyed Queen. We are not exactly sure what her status was, and we do not know about Marika, if Marika was a demigod who became an Empyrean, or if Marika was something else entirely. But for now, we can take a look at Melina, Miquella, and Ronnie and say that yes, they are demigods and they became an Empyreans. Now, you might say that to become an Empyrean, you need to be born from one deity, because both Melina and Miquella were born of Marika. As we all know, spoiler, Radagon and Marika are the same, so when they had children, they were essentially born kind of asexually from one entity. That's not the case for Ronnie, however. That is not the case for Ronnie, which seems to suggest that you do not have to be born of the same deity. Perhaps being born of the same deity makes it easier to become an Empyrean? I do not know, but it seems that the story suggests that you do not have to be born of the same deity. But you do have to be a demigod, and I believe that the factor that plays the biggest role is motivation. You see, Elden Ring, as a story, puts a lot of emphasis on motivation, on the strength of self. It is notable in a lot of side quests. It is notable in a lot of characters such as Marika, Radagon, Morgoth. You see it in Ronnie, you see it in Godfrey, you see it in a lot of characters throughout the story. And I believe that is one of the bigger factors. Melina had obviously a lot of motivation to become an Empyrean, to finally get rid of the Rotten God and to help Mikola. Mikola obviously had a lot of motivation to help his sister and maybe more, but we'll talk about that boy later. Ronnie obviously has a lot of motivation because she wants to rid the world of the Great Will, right? And the other characters kind of do not. You have Radon, who's a demigod, but it does not seem like he opposed the Golden Order, nor would need any reason to become an Empyrean. He just simply wanted to be a warrior. You have Morgoth, who worshipped Golden Order, who followed Golden Order. Mog, not really, but we're gonna talk about Mog a little bit later as well. I'm gonna mention him a little bit later, but Mog, not so much perhaps, and the deciding factor here could be Mikola, and his love for Mikola might have went against any motivation that he might have had to become an Empyrean, if it makes sense. And of course, Rykard is another one. Well, you might say, oh, why Rykard would not be an Empyrean? Well, Rykard opposed Greater Will, so perhaps the reason why Rykard never became an Empyrean is because Rykard sought different means of ascending. He did not want to simply become an Empyrean and tie himself to another greater deity. But Rykard is someone who I would like to talk about in a separate video. But with all that information, for now, for this video, let us assume that Empyrean is something that you can become, right? So with all of that in mind, Marika, where the fuck does she come from? What the fuck is her deal? While it might be impossible to think about where she came from, I think I might have a few ideas. Here's my suggestion. Nextella and Nokron. Now, that is quite a bold claim to make, but I'll still make it. But for the purpose of this video, I would like to remove Nokron and focus more on Nextella. The reason why is because we do find Crucible Knights in Nokron, but we do not find any in Nextella, as far as I remember, which might suggest that Nokron might have been an offspring city of Nextella of the sort. So for the purpose of this video, I'm going to mainly refer to Nextella only, but I still might mention some things relating to Nokron. It's just a small detail I would want to mention, but so that I don't have to repeat myself every time Nextella or Nokron. I'll just say Nextella from now on. But one of the biggest reasons are, of course, Black Knife Assassins, and Black Knife Assassin armor states that Black Knife's assassins were rumored to be women, Numen, who had connections with Marika. Now, that is already a lot of things stated here. You see, they did not have to say all of those things together. They could simply say that Black Knife Assassins are all Numen, or are all women, or have connections to Marika. By saying that they were all women, all Numen, and had connection to Marika, it creates a lot of implications, which might or might not imply that Marika herself was a Numen, or that there's some certain connection between Numen and what Marika was, and that Marika came with them. Now, the reason why I say came with them is because Numen are not native to Lands Between, of course, as we all know. Which is why I suspect that Nextella might not be native, because Nextella has a lot of implications towards space. Now, you see, as well as Ronnie and her ending has connections with the stars in relation to the moon, and which is why it utilizes the color blue, those are not the colors of Nextella. The primary colors of Nextella are black, shades of pastel purple, and shades of gray. And Nextella also makes a mention of their Lord of Night, and Nextella also had Night Maidens, as we all know, which creates a connection between Nextella and the stars, but in a different way than we have with Rani. It seems to create more connections with the night, with the unknown, and quite possibly with the glow, maybe. Now, the reason why I mentioned the Lord of Night, the maidens, and everything is because, and that's pure speculation on my part, but would you not say that Marika's outfit might be described as maiden-like in nature? Maybe. I mean, the color motif is definitely there. I mentioned that the color motifs of Nextella are grays, blacks, and shades of pastel purple, right? As well as Marika's armor is black and gold. Well, the gold might be from the Greater Will, but the black might be from Nextella. After all, black doesn't really appear anywhere as a color motif for the Greater Will, does it not? So quite possibly, Marika's outfit might be hinting at her connection with Nextella, her past, so to say. Maybe the whole reason why we have maidens in Lands Between is because of Marika. Nextella had night maidens. Marika might have been one of those night maidens. Maybe the reason why we have Elden Lords is because Nextella was awaiting their Lord of Night, which is why Marika created Elden Lords, first of whom was Godfrey, of course. Again, pure speculation on my part, but something I felt worth mentioning because colors definitely play a big role in Elden Ring. They are connected to specific things, and the presence of black in Marika's outfit felt interesting to me, to say the least. So, going along with my theory, so far, it seems that Marika might be connected to Nextella, which would also possibly explain their downfall, right? They were not for the Greater Will, and when Greater Will finally came to power, they were destroyed. Why were they destroyed? Well, because they were trying to hurt the Greater Will. As we all know, part of the Rani's quest have you go to Nokron to get the blade from there, which can hurt Greater Will and its envoys, the Fingers. Something that will come back later, in fact, in the video. So, as we know, Nokron and Nextella, they were fucking around with things. They were fucking around with artificial life, as we can see from the Mimic Tear and the such. And they were also experimenting with the ways to kill Greater Will and kind of death in general. Not only do we have the knife that can kill, and do not only we have the Black Knife Assassins, who have the unique attack on the Black knife that you can obtain, but also responsible for killing Godwyn. And trust me, that is something that we're gonna discuss in greater detail much later, to my dismay, because oh boy, that is a topic. But they also have connection to Destined Death with the Gloam-Eyed Queen, because she seemingly wielded a part of a Destined Death, which Malekith eventually took from her. So that would explain why Greater Will wanted to sing them. So what is the situation looking like right now? Well, right now it seems that there might have been many factions in Lands Between. Lands Between in general seems like a magnet. There's a lot of players here, you see? There's a lot of outer gods. You have Greater Will, you have the Flame of Frenzy, and oh boy, I'm gonna talk about that bitch later. We have the Fell God, obviously. We have Shapeless Mother, possibly. We have the Death Bird Mother, possibly. We have the Snake thing, which might or might not be the guy, who knows? There's a lot of gods in Lands Between. Why? Maybe Lands Between is special. Maybe there's something about this place that brings the gods in. There's also the Rot God. and whoever the fuck is responsible for cursing Mikola with the curse of youth, you know? And so it's not unreasonable to imagine that there were many warring factions who fought for control. One of those factions could have been Nextella, and another could have been Gloam-Eyed Queen. Maybe her and Marika were on one side, or maybe not. Marika did, after all, later defeated her. Maybe, since we find the knife in Nokron, Nokron was the statue of the Gloam-Eyed Queen and was responsible for trying to kill the demigods and kill the Greater Will, as well as Marika had different plans. Now, Marika is quite a warmonger, we know, of course, and it's no surprise that one of the biggest motivations for her to ally with the Greater Will was control, to defeat the giants and their fell god, to defeat the dragons, who were now without their god because that god ran away, as we all know, to defeat whoever was in control of Stormhaven, I believe it's called, and to just claim the lands between, as we know, to defeat Rey Lucaria, which of course they ended up defeating them in a different way, as we all know, wink wink. I do believe that in that part of Marika's history, Gloam-Eyed Queen plays probably the biggest role. I mean, she seems to pose the biggest threat to Marika. Not only was she considered by Two Fingers, which means that there was a possibility of her aligning with the Greater Will, but she could also kill Marika. It might have been the case that while demigods, you know, could be killed, Marika, being an Empyrean, cannot be killed so easily, and Gloam-Eyed Queen and her Black Flame and her apostles and nobles might have been the only people posing the realest threat to Marika, which is why Marika, aligned with the Greater Will, ultimately got Malekith, who defeated Gloam-Eyed Queen. I do believe that, if we go along with that theory, she plays a critical role in Marika aligning with the Greater Will. She was the main motivation for Marika to do what she did. So, at the end of the day, where does it leave us? Well, we're gonna talk about Gloam-Eyed Queen later in the video more. For now, let us leave her be. And we're also gonna talk more about Greater Will. There's of course a lot to discuss about Greater Will. There's of course Earth Tree and the Great Tree. It seems those two were different. It seems that before we had the Great Tree, we had the Crucible, you know, and then after Crucible you had the Great Tree, and then you had the Earth Tree, and then you had the Greater Will, and like, what the fuck is the deal here? We're gonna discuss those later. For now, let us focus purely on Marika. So what do we have? We discussed how Empyreans possibly come to be. We discussed why I think that Marika might be from Nextella, and what it might mean for her character and for the future. And we also discussed why she might have aligned herself with the Greater Will to defeat the Gloam-Eyed Queen. One interesting thing to note here is that if we believe that Nextella and Nokron belong to Marika and Gloam-Eyed Queen, and therefore were two different factions, it would then be interesting to consider the fact that Black Knife assassins might have been from Nokron and not Nextella. Something we're gonna bring up later. But for now, this is about all that we have for Marika's beginning, so to say, for her early life, or as far as we can really speculate realistically with the evidences given to us. For the most part, I used Gloam-Eyed Queen's nature as an Empyrean, her connection to Death and Death and Black Flame, and the color motifs to connect Marika to Nextella. And then we move to the middle portion of her life, which is, thank God, is the easiest one. That is the one we do not need to discuss at all, really, because we know about that one the most. This is the period where Marika created her Golden Order. She aligned with the greater will. She married Godfrey. She defeated the giants. She sealed the fell god. She defeated the dragons. She defeated whoever was in Stormhaven. She had truce with Rey Lucaria through Radagon. She gave birth to demigods. Radagon gave birth to demigods. She established her order. She contained the death. So now we had reincarnations where people did not die, they were simply reborn. It might have been the case that before people would be reborn but as something new, you know, proper reincarnation, but now people would be reborn themselves. That was the order, right? This is the part of the story about Marika that we know, and we do not really need to discuss it because we know how it went. It does lead us, however, to the next complicated part of Marika's life, which is the end. The events of Godwyn's death, what happened after that, what happened before that, the details, the yada yada, the blah blah blah. And so, where can we start speculating here? Well, we would need to start speculating at the point where Marika started speculating about the greater will, because it seems that everything was cool and good and stable and in stasis until Marika started asking questions. So following from this, we have Marika who started to question things, and that is very important because in our timeline, which we have divided into 3 halves, the beginning, middle, and the end, her questioning things, questioning her golden order and questioning the greater will, that directly leads into the second half of her finale, which is the Night of the Black Knives, which then directly leads to the Shattering, which directly leads to her death and the events of the game. So let's talk about that for a moment. We know that what she found was probably not good, because if it was good, if she discovered that greater will had her best interest at heart, or that greater will was good, then there would be no reason for Marika to go against it, which we can see she did. One of the evidences which we have for it is none other than, of course, a remembrance of the Black Blade that you get after defeating Malekith, which states that Marika's sole need of her shadow was a vessel to lock away death and death. Even then, she betrayed him. Now, we know that Malekith, being a shadow, was created by greater will to look after Empyreans, right? And by saying that Marika betrayed him, it is kind of indirectly saying that Marika betrayed greater will. She betrayed her golden order. And of course, the betrayal at hand is her having to do something with Ronnie's plot behind the Night of the Black Knives. But that is me getting a little bit ahead of myself, because first, I would like to talk with you a little about what she might have discovered. So, a theory that greater will might not be good has been going around for a long time, and another theory that greater will might be connected to the Flame of Frenzy has also been going on for a long time. People would talk about how possibly the Flame of Frenzy and the greater will might have been 2 sides of the same coin, but here's a proposition. What if Flame of Frenzy is intended finale of greater will's plan, or they are one and the same? Now, here's the reason why I believe that. Envoys. It seems that each and every god in the game Elden Ring, in this universe, has an envoy of sort. The god of Rot possibly has those weird fucking shrimps as the envoys, or some sort of mother shrimp as the envoy. His name is escaping me right now, but there's this guy in Caelid who is tied to the Millicent's quest line, and when you try to kill him, you find out that it's just the body of a shrimp, and he says that there's plenty to choose from, hinting at some sort of a hive mind, which could act as the envoy of the god of Rot. we of course know that deaf-right birds are envoys of the deaf mother goddess, whatever their god is. Giants, fire giants, essentially acted as maybe possibly sort of envoys for the fell god. Maybe we can speculate about that much at the very least. And we know for a certainty that two fingers are envoys of the greater will, and we can see those two fingers with all the demigods in the lands between. Radon, Morgoth, well, actually, I believe that Morgoth and Mog had one finger for both of them, because they have one tower for both of them. Something interesting to look into, perhaps. We know that Rani had her fingers. We know that fingers also communicated with the Gloam-Dyed Queen. We know that, well, we can guess that Marika probably had her own set of fingers as well. So fingers acted as the envoys of the greater will. So far, so good. Well, each god has a different envoy. It's not like the envoy of the deaf bird mother goddess is like some sort of a deaf fingers. So tell me, why is the envoy of the Flame of Frenzy 3 fingers? Why is it fingers? And building up on it, why are 3 fingers imprisoned below where the merchants are at? Who thought that would be a good idea to build tomb for the 3 fingers who embody the Flame of Frenzy right below the merchants? It just seems a little bit too perfect. Earlier in the video, I mentioned how even though this is a lore video and a speculation video and a theory video, at some points I would have to speculate with no evidences. At some point there will be no concrete evidences, and I would have to speculate using my logic, my experience as a writer, my experience as someone who enjoys the games that From Software makes, and just pure speculation pretty much. And here's what I'm going to speculate. What if Marika found out that the Flame of Frenzy was always the intended plan of the greater will? You might ask yourself, why? Well, earlier I did mention how lands between are weird. If you think about it, the name alone is already weird. Lands between. Between what, right? And then you also consider the fact that there's a lot of gods here, as I mentioned before, I believe. The Greater Will, the God of Rod, whoever is responsible for the eternal youth that Mikola has, the Shapeless Mother, the Deaf Bird Goddess, the Fallen God, this whatever the Serpent is. There's a lot of strong entities in here, which possibly suggests that this land is somehow special. What does the Flame of Frenzy do? It destroys lands between. It burns it completely. So why would Greater Will want to do that? Well, there's a few options. Maybe Greater Will wishes to collect the power from the lands between, and the only way to do that is by destroying it and somehow collecting that power in death, if you wish. Maybe it wishes to uproot the great tree, right? And the only way to do that is by burning the lands between. Maybe Greater Will is just a psychotic, sadistic outer god that simply wishes to destroy lands between. That is also a possibility. The follow-up question to that would be, well, why did it not do it from the get-go? Well, the Flame of Frenzy is a powerful tool. However, it's not easy to manifest. It's not a tool that is easily manifested. In fact, it's a tool that has to be manifested through pain and fear and agony of living beings. And it takes time, which is why you have Shabriri. Now, based on Shabriri's woe, we can guess that Shabriri lied about something and was punished for it. Now, what could be the lie that Shabriri lied? Well, perhaps it's the lie that got all the merchants locked up in their tomb. a small reminder, people don't simply vanish when they die in Lands Between. You have to essentially come back to the roots to be reborn. And if you don't, you're just kind of stuck. Which means that all the people, all the merchants in the tomb are still alive. The only reason why they're not moving or screaming in agony is because they simply do not give a fuck anymore. It's probably been 1,000 upon 1,000 of years that they've been there. When Hayata talks about people who wish that they were never born, she might be referring to the merchants who are so tortured at this point that they simply do not wish to go on. This is the kind of people you need to manifest the Flame of Frenzy. And the only way you can manifest those people is by having the Golden Order. The Greater Will established the Golden Order, age of peace and tranquility and stagnation and happiness, and then it took a group of people and made them suffer unimaginable suffering, so that their suffering and their madness would create the Flame of Frenzy. The Flame of Frenzy, which then would be imbued into the three fingers which were locked below the merchant's tomb, which means that the Greater Will probably built this place in secret from Marika, or never told Marika what it was for. Which is why when you fall down, you find the three fingers and you inherit its power. And I believe that this might have been what Marika discovered. Now, on a small side note, that's more like a funny small detail than anything related to Marika, but that would also entail that if you wish to get rid of the Flame of Frenzy for like good, and kind of have like the best ending possible if you wish, you would actually, before sacrificing Melina, you would go inherit the flame, and then in the form of Azula, you would use Mikula's Needle to get rid of the Flame of Frenzy, and then get whatever ending you wish to get. This way, you literally kind of destroy the Flame of Frenzy for good. Shabriri is still around, probably yes, but it would take a long time and a very specific setup to recreate the Flame of Frenzy, which you're probably not gonna do as easily the second time around. So it's just kind of like a funny little detail that I noticed when I thought about it, that probably the best way to go about things is to actually inherit the Flame of Frenzy and then destroy it for good in the form of Azula, or Azula. I think it's Azula. I think it's like a softer sound there. Now, I wish that things became more simple from here on out, but they don't. Because now we have the infamous Knight of the Black Knives. One of the most conflicted and harder events to understand in all of the Elden Ring. So, what do we know? To simplify it, we know that Ranni wanted to get rid of influence of the Greater Will. And to do that, she needed to kill herself while killing some other demigod, which would result in her severing herself from the Greater Will. Again, I'm simplifying, but if you made it this far into the video, you probably know the basics of what have happened. We know that Ranni stole part of Destined Death from Malekith. She created the knife to do her killing, of course. And we know that somehow that knife ended up in the hands of the Black Knives. And we can suspect that Marika possibly knew about it. Now, why do we suspect that Marika probably knew about this? Well, earlier we talked about how Black Knives possibly have connection to Marika. Well, they have connection to Marika that is established. We do not know what this connection is, but there's some sort of history between them. And since we know that the Black Knives generally hang around Lindale, and they attack both Blight and EG, as well as evil Blight Shadow that is trying to attack Ranni in her questline, we can guess that Black Knives Assassin are not in favor of Ranni, probably. But then the question is, how did he get the knife? Well, here's when we're gonna have to speculate a little bit. So, it is stated, once again, from Malikev's remembrance, that Marika somehow betrayed him, and we know that she was possibly somehow responsible for what Rani did. So, what I think happened is that Marika opened up, she created an opening for Rani to steal a part of Death and Death from Malikev, and then when Rani finished creating her knife, she ordered the Black Knife assassins to steal it. Why? Well, because she was planning to fight the Greater Will herself. This is where things get a lot more complicated. So one of the questions that never made sense to me was, why would Marika kill Godwyn? Because if you believe that Marika gave the order to kill Godwyn, she worked at Rani, right? Why Godwyn? Why would she kill the son that she loved the most? Because we know that the grief over his death is what pushed her over the edge. Was she faking it? It doesn't seem plausible. Did she not know about Rani's plan to kill herself at the same time that Godwyn was being killed? That seems just too stupid for someone like Marika. It just doesn't make sense. Like, okay, some people thrown out the idea that Godwyn, possibly the plan was to kill Godwyn so that Godwyn would become some sort of a Prince of Death that Marika could use as a weapon against the Greater Will, but that doesn't make sense because this would mean that she did not know that Rani was planning to kill herself at the same time. If the plan was indeed to kill Godwyn to turn him into some sort of a Prince of Death, and people mostly used an old crone that was sitting at the roots who says how it is sad that Godwyn did not die proper death, and they also use Death Lightning Incantation as a proof because Death Lightning Incantation says that the Golden Light was wielded by Godwyn, who befriended Fortisax, so people were speculating that Godwyn already might have some connections to Death, and therefore that was the plan. But that would imply that Marika did not know that Rani was planning to kill herself at the same time that Godwyn was being killed, and that would simply make Marika look stupid. Also, going back to the old crone, when she says that Godwyn did not die a proper death, she might simply be referring to what proper death was in the world of Elden Ring, which is to say, dying and being reborn into yourself by the Greater Will, by the Earth Tree, right? So, I think what most likely happened and what makes the most amount of sense is that she did not plan to kill Godwyn. She did not know that Godwyn would be killed. That would explain why she was so grief-struck by it afterwards. Because if she planned it or she knew that this would happen, it would not make sense for her to then break the Elden Ring and essentially kill herself. It also doesn't make sense because we know that the Black Knife's assassins, their leader was then imprisoned and her daughter was killed. But if Marika gave the order, why would she kill them and imprison them? So this is why I think that, and once again, pure speculation on my part, someone else gave the order. Someone else gave them the order. Was it Greater Will? Well, probably not, because if we believe that Black Knife assassins came from Nokron or Naxtella, they would have no reason to work with Greater Will. Was it perhaps Gloam-Dyed Queen? If she did not die, maybe she somehow gave the order? That is one possibility, which I think does have some ground. Perhaps after this, after finding out that the Gloam-Dyed Queen gave them the order to kill Godwyn, this is when Marika killed the Gloam-Dyed Queen for good, which then resulted in her being reborn into Melina, something to talk about later as well. So that is one possibility, because there's really no one else. Well, no one else except one person, really. Mikola. Now, it might sound like a crackpot theory, but there is some ground on which you can believe that Mikola might have done it. Are you interested in what it is? Well, then you have to watch my Mikola video. Hey, that's how I pull you in. So instead of talking about it here, because this is supposed to be a video about Marika, I will talk about this theory in a separate video where I will discuss Mikola in greater detail, a video which will probably come out after this video, so keep an eye on it. But it is my belief that while Marika had a part to play in Ronnie stealing the knife, in essentially enabling her to do it, and the way that the Black Knives got the knife is that Marika ordered them to get the knife, it simply does not make sense to me for Marika to order the killing of Godwyn, and if she did not order it, it means that Black Knife's assassin acted on their own, which is a possibility. Once again, if we believe that the Black Knife's assassin wore from Nextel or Nokron, which was then destroyed by the Greater Will, who aligned with Marika, they could have simply been mad at Marika. But if Marika had greater plans at dealing a strike directly at the Greater Will, it doesn't make sense for why the Black Knife's assassin would just kind of blow the whole plan for just some petty revenge, right? It kind of makes more sense if somebody else ordered, and I think that there's no better candidates than a possible Glom-Dyed Queen and Mikola, of whom I will talk later. Now, in regards to Glom-Dyed Queen, there are of course speculations that she could be somehow a child of Marika. Of course, Melina mentions how there's enough dialogue which is done by Melina which suggests the idea that she was somehow born from Marika, not Marika and Radagon, but from Marika, or that somehow she was born unnaturally. She mentions when talking about Bach how it must be different to be born from parents, which made some people speculate that perhaps Melina was not so much born by Marika as much as she was reborn through the roots of the Great Tree by Marika. There's some evidences to believe it. There's of course the Eye, and of course earlier I believe I mentioned that Melina is the only other character than Ronnie who has this weird crow symbol in her eye. And we know that Ronnie is a demigod embodying a body of a doll, so perhaps it's the same thing here. Perhaps what we have here is a soul of a demigod embodying a different body, a body that is not its own, which is why you have the mark, right? Which would give credit to the idea that Marika somehow made a plan with the Glom-Dyed Queen or killed the Glom-Dyed Queen and forcefully or not, rebirth her in a body of a maiden, which then would be destined to burn the Earth Tree, because as we know, only a specific maiden can burn the Earth Tree, only a specific maiden can ignite the fire. We know that other than us, there were two other Tarnished who almost made it. There was Vike, of course, who fell to the Flame of Frenzy, and then there was Befral, I believe I pronounced his name correctly, Befral, who actually made it all the way to the top and burned his maiden, but it didn't work because she was not destined for it. It would make sense that Melina is destined for it if Melina is a Glom-Dyed Queen who was kind of, you know, responsible for creating the Black Flame, and had kind of like her mission was kind of all about killing demigods and such. And if we also then believe, according to my theory, that Glom-Dyed Queen might have came from Nokron, who was kind of all about trying to kill the Greater Will and its envoys, it would also make further sense that she would be the one to ignite the fire to her the Earth Tree. But with all of that speculation now finished and done with, we have the history of Marika. Kind of. The history of a possible warmongerer who accepted a bargain that was not in her benefit to defeat her enemies. A history of said warmongerer who started to question her alliances, and a history of a warmongerer who tried to get out of it, tried to play behind Greater Will's back, and then failed and lost it all because her beloved son was killed, which makes sense, honestly. While Marika comes off as a smart and calculated warmongerer, she also comes off as a person who genuinely cares about Godwyn, who genuinely loved Godfrey, because in one of the lines that we hear from Melina, Marika allegedly did tell Godwyn to go, fight, seek death, and then come back. Or something to that regard. Marika was a calculated person, but Marika was also a person who felt, a person with emotions, a person with hubris and faults of her own. And yeah, are my theories correct? I do not know. We will probably not know until we get any DLCs which might explore further on the lore of Elden Ring. But if I'm correct in anything that I said, then I will never let it live down. I will constantly remind everyone about the fact that I'm correct. And if I'm not correct, well, at least I had fun. And in the end of the day, making theories is fun. And maybe if I push someone into some direction, maybe someone watches my video and thinks of something different, great, right? Now, before I finish this video, I would like to say a few things. First of all, go follow my Twitch. I stream. I will be trying to make videos more regularly now, but if you want more of a Centipede content, if you want to hear my beautiful smooth voice more often, you can follow me on Twitch where I play games. I mostly play RPGs and MMORPGs. We're talking Final Fantasy XIV, we're talking Pathfinder, Dragon Age, Mass Effect, you know, RPGs, the good stuff, right? Was thinking about playing Cyberpunk as of late, so, you know, check me out. Check out my Twitter as well. I mostly post when I go live, but I also repost a lot of Yuri. So yeah, this video sponsored by me. Yay. And I'll see you in the next video where I will talk about my crackpot theory about Mikola. Fun. See you around. Do not die out there. Bye.